We're going to turn to Isaiah chapter 7, first thing. But while you're turning, let me ask you about Christmas. It's the Sunday before Christmas. It's our fourth Sunday of Advent. If you're visiting with us today, this is something new for us. We don't normally follow the Advent calendar, but I want to try something different this year. So we're looking at the liturgy, we're looking at the scriptures in the liturgical calendar, plus we're also following the Advent calendar. Today it is the Sunday of Joy. And with that in mind, let me ask you a question. Is Christmas really always joyful for you guys? I mean, come on, let's be honest. Yeah, tomorrow we drive to Nashville. Just saying that is immediately torpedoing my expectations. I drove to Knoxville on Friday, and that was bad enough. And Nashville versus Knoxville, I'd rather drive through Knoxville any day than to just go to the edge, the airport in Nashville. Oh yeah, it's crazy. I do not like traffic. I was 12 years almost in Montana. There you could drive 100 miles and not see another car. Here, yeah, it's generally somebody who has problems deciding whether that light is actually green or red. And it's amazing to me how many colorblind people that we have in the world, apparently. So, that's one part of it. Little things like that, traveling, and then, you're tired by the time you get there, and then you're tired when you come home. But then, family. Sometimes family is not so joyful, is it? Yeah, I don't know. Well, amen means so be it. I don't know if that's a so be it. I'd really like for some people to change, but maybe the lesson that I learned in Scripture is if there's going to be any change, I should expect it out of myself and not my family. So this morning, we're going to look at a guy who was not very good about change. His name is Ahaz. He's also alternatively referred to in Scripture as Jehoahaz. So let's look at this king of Israel. He's an interesting guy. Isaiah chapter 7, verse 10. Again, the Lord spoke to Ahaz. Let's stop there for just a second. We're starting in the middle of the story, and we need a little character on Ahaz. He's king. He has just been told to trust God, and he's struggling with it. I'll have to tell you, we're going to find out, number one, God asks an incredible thing of him, or promises an incredible thing, and he doesn't take advantage of it, which gives you an indicator of just how lacking in wisdom Ahaz was. He decided to trust his counselors rather than God, and he aligned himself with the very people who were going to vanquish Israel. And so this is interesting. He's an interesting character. The Lord has spoken to Ahaz. We're in the middle of the story, and this is how it goes. Verse 11, ask a sign of the Lord your God. Let it be as deep as Sheol, the grave, or as high as heaven. Now that's a pretty good, I don't know what's in my envelope, but, I would think being able to ask God anything as deep as the grave or as high as heaven, I could ask him for a sign. I'm guessing that's more than that's in the envelope, wouldn't you? No? Right? So here's God saying to Ahaz, who's not a great guy, hey, go ahead and ask me a sign. But Ahaz said, verse 12, I will not ask. Does that strike you as maybe, let's go ahead and use the word stupid? Yeah. I will not ask, and I will not put the Lord to the test. Now God has just, through Isaiah, said, go ahead and ask me, and Ahaz says no. But he comes up with a churchy sort of answer. Sometimes we do that, don't we? We think we We can kind of fool maybe people, fool maybe God, if we couch it in some sort of churchy answer. So that's what he does, verse 13. And he said, "Hear then, O house of David, is it too little for you to weary men, that you weary my God also? Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. He shall eat curds and honey when he knows how to refuse the evil and choose the good. For before the boy knows how to refuse the evil and choose the good, the land whose two kings you dread will be deserted." What an answer. And part of that answer is the promise of the Messiah. It gets quoted later on as the foundation for Jesus' birth by a virgin. There is also an answer to Ahaz in the midst of this that comes very soon, but Ahaz doesn't know really the power of what's coming 700 years after his death. You know, he was 20 years old when he assumed the throne. He only ruled for 16 years. He died at the age of 36, and he's recorded as one of the worst kings of Israel. And one of the reasons is for no other reason than he couldn't trust God. So let's remember that in trusting God, we need to be, number one, prepared for his timeline. Have you laid some sort of test before God sometimes, and it doesn't come in the time that you want? You know, we forget sometimes, don't we, that God operates on a timeline that's not measured in 70 years even, which means his plan may outlive me. Sometimes it's measured in 7 centuries. Sometimes it's measured in millennia. And we need to allow God to be God, and that's part of the trust issue. Look and see how this is answered in the book of Matthew. Now, the birth of Jesus Christ took place in this way. When his mother Mary had been betrothed to Joseph, before they came together, she was found to be with child from the Holy Spirit. And her husband Joseph, being a just man and unwilling to put her to shame, resolved to divorce her quietly. Makes sense. She's just a teenage girl. They're engaged, which is equivalent to, it has the same legal power as marriage in our culture. And so she comes to him and she's pregnant. And in their law, he could have her stoned, but he just wants to deal with this quietly. He doesn't want to shame her anymore. Verse 20. But as he considered these things, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream, saying, "Joseph, son of David, do not fear to take Mary as your wife, for that which is conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She will bear a son, and you shall call his name Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins." All this took place to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet. "Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel," which means God with us. Now, when Joseph woke from sleep, he did as the angel of the Lord commanded him. What? How did he know that wasn't bad pizza that he had? I mean, really, you know, he goes to sleep, he has this, and he wakes up, and he did as the angel of the Lord commanded him. He took his wife, but knew her not until she had given birth to a son. And he called his name Jesus. Think about how incredible that is. Last week we talked about Mary. You know, here's a teenage girl told she's going to give birth to the Messiah, told that God was the one who had planted his seed within her, and you know, here's a girl maybe 15 years old, and she says, "Okay, I'm up with that." And you think about the alternative. That, I mean, literally in that culture, they could take her out, drop her over a small cliff, about 6 feet tall. Her accusers, and that would be Joseph, could be one of them. And one other person, whoever else knew about the pregnancy. Those two witnesses would be the first ones to grab a rock about the size of my head and drop it over on top of her. If the fall didn't kill her, they're hoping that first big rock would kill her. That's what could have happened. And here's Mary, and she hears this, and she says, okay, I'm down with that. I think that's pretty incredible. But then this Joseph guy, and we have hardly any information on Joseph. Here's Joseph himself, maybe a teenager. It was not unusual for a 15-year-old girl to marry a 30-year-old man. We don't really know how old he was. We know he disappears from the picture. Likely he's passed as we go farther in the Gospels. But we know so little of him other than this wonderful picture. And he has this dream. An angel appears to him and says, go ahead and marry the girl. Give her your name. Give the child your heritage. Take him as your own, because she's got the Messiah that she's carrying. And Joseph says, I'm down with that. You know, I don't know about you, but I think that's got to be two of the most incredible people that this planet has ever produced. Don't you? I mean, either that or stupid in a way stupid doesn't count. But then if we're going to compare them to Ahaz, doesn't Ahaz really pale in comparison? He's running the kingdom. God's prophet comes to him and says, you know, all you have to do is trust God. Stay with your allies. Don't jump ship. Don't get the Syrians involved. Just trust God. Do you struggle with that in your life? The theme this morning is joy. But I think in order for us to understand joy, one of the things that we have to comprehend is what it means to trust God. The other thing is we really need to define joy. And I think a lot of us don't understand what joy is. We mix it up with happiness. So I had this great experience 2 weeks ago. I actually had a great sermon illustration last week. I did not share with you because it was so much better for this week. And here's what it was. Where did we go? We went someplace and then we stopped on the way back. Well, anyway, we stopped in Cookeville on the way back. And Suzanne wants to... Sam's graduation. We went and saw Sam's graduation. Great deal. It was great. You know, lovely family. Sam graduated. He's a nurse now. All that good stuff. But then we stopped in Cookeville on the way back because that's what you do if you're from Crossville. You go to the big city and you eat in the big city. All right? You know. And so we go to Cookeville, and Suzanne wants to go to Kohl's shopping. I don't know if you know this or not. Shopping is this high on my priority list. So she says, you know, they've got 30 or 35% off today. I go in, it's wall-to-wall people. I'm immediately in my discomfort zone. And I head towards the back, head right out front. I think I was in the building less than 5 minutes. I get out to the car, I'm sitting in the car, I got the music turned on, and I'm thinking, oh, you know, I desperately need a haircut. And if anybody was paying attention, I desperately needed a haircut. There's not much here, but when it gets here, it really gets wild. And I'm thinking, well, there's that place right down the street. You know, it's a quarter of a mile away, and I've heard about it from some friends. When I was out in Kansas City, I had a buddy who got a haircut while we were at National Convention, and he's so excited. He went to Sports Clips to get his haircut. And I'm thinking, what Sports Clips? You know, I lived in Montana for 12 years. That's isolation. It's primitive. I mean, a haircut out there was going and rubbing your head up against a tree, you know? So you know, what is this Sports Clips? I kind of Google it, and the information they give you on their website is, it kind of sounds like a cross between a barbershop and Hooters. So I'm thinking, now why would my preacher friend want to go to Hooters? So maybe it's not that the girls dress like the girls in the Hooters, but it is very, very male friendly. So I go to Sports Clips, which is just down the road, and text Suzanne, say, how long are you going to be? Long enough for me to get a haircut? Sure. I've got a line that's, you know, she's got to stand in line. So I go to Sports Clips, and I go in there, big screens everywhere. Football games on. I mean, you know, it's got sports games everywhere. Even in front of every seat, there's a big screen TV. There's lockers. And it's Sports Clips is set up like a baseball locker room. And so each one of the hairdressers, and they're dressed appropriately. You know, it's not a Hooters sort of environment, but everything's labeled like you can get an MVP, you can get a double, which is a double MVP, you can get a triple, which is a triple MVP. And I'm just going, I want a haircut. Just give me a haircut. If you can't tell, I'm pretty no frills. So I go in, finally get in to see the girl, her name is Heather. And she says, well, since you're a first-time customer, you get the MVP for free. So I'm thinking, okay, this might be nice. But my wife's sitting at Kohl's. How much time will this take? Oh, maybe about 5 minutes. Oh, I can handle that. Meanwhile, Suzanne's already done, didn't know that at this point. And so she cuts my hair. She does a great job. Is it a great haircut? Is it a good haircut? Yeah, so it's a good haircut. I'm feeling pretty good. And then I get the MVP. Here's what the MVP is. It takes back to this dark room. And there's these seats that recline back and they vibrate with a heater. And then there's a sink and they wash your hair. I don't get anybody to wash my hair very often, or my scalp, I should say. And so she's washing it and my head's tingling. I said, is that shampoo got eucalyptus oil in it? She says, tea tree. I had to Google it later. Yes, it's melaleuca, it's eucalyptus oil. So that's what makes you tingle. And it's just, oh, it's so invigorating. And while she's doing that, a hot towel goes on my face. Yeah. Vibrating chair. She takes me back after that experience, sits me down in this chair, and then towel on my shoulder, she dries my hair, and then just before I'm finished, she takes this little massage wand and starts to massage my shoulders. Guy's paradise, big screen TV, games on. That's why you pay for a double or a triple. Not only do you get that treatment for 2 or 3 times longer than they give you, but you can finish watching the game, I think. You know, I don't know. Sounds cool, doesn't it? Problem is, if that becomes the pursuit of my joy, I mean, I'm already over it. It's nice to relive it for you. But I won't experience that again until the next time I'm there. That, by the way, is really the definition of happiness. And the majority of Americans pursue happiness. Even Christian Americans pursue happiness rather than pursuing joy. We talk about joy, but we don't really understand it. The truth is, some of us are probably happy addicts. And you know what a happy addict is, don't you? It's a happy junkie. And we just drift from one Sports Clips sort of situation, circumstance, to another. Some of us, you know, Christian Americans are no different than other Americans in spending too much money this time of year. One of the reasons is we're trying to pursue happiness. We're trying to get that little kick in the spirit by spending some money and feeling a little better about ourselves for a little period of time, and then we go back to feeling pretty miserable, don't we? And that's because we're happiness junkies at heart. That is the human spirit. We want to feel happy, we want to feel good, we want to feel different than we normally do. So we pursue these little circumstances that last for a little while, but they don't sustain us. So I'm not sure you're suffering from loss. Remember Jeff Foxworthy did that, You Might Be a Redneck Yet. sort of thing. So you might be a happy addict if you feel like you're not as good as other people. And so one of the ways you compensate is trying to fill that with happiness. You yearn to be of service, but you have no idea what you have to contribute and why it matters. That probably, when it comes to service in the church, that's the number one comment I get from church people. I don't know what I'm supposed to do, and I don't know how to do it. You find yourself striving in vain for an impossible to achieve standard of perfection. Your fears keep you from living large. You're afraid to do it, and you're afraid to risk. You're afraid to try new things. It's one reason why we have a budget meeting later on. It's one reason why in churches a lot of things go without approval, because people are afraid to try something new. They're no different than Ahaz. He says, no, I don't want to go there. I'm afraid I'm going to try this sure bet. I think these guys down the road are going to be my best bet, rather than trusting God. And so we do things all the time where we don't trust what God could do through us. We never risk. You're frequently worried that you're not good enough, smart enough, thin enough, young enough. You fill in the enough blank. You feel like a victim of circumstances that are beyond your control. Does that feel like you? You feel like your daily life is meaningless and task-driven. You often feel helpless, hopeless, or pessimistic. You protect your heart with steel walls. You're not good at relationships, or at least if you have relationships, they're a mile wide and an inch deep. You often feel like you don't really matter and your love doesn't really make a difference. You're always trying to fit in and belong, but rarely feel you do. You feel beaten down by the challenges you face in your life. You suffer from a variety of vague, hard-to-treat physical symptoms, such as fatigue, chronic pain, weight loss, gain or loss, insomnia, skin disorders, or gastrointestinal symptoms. Depression, anxiety, these sort of issues show up most often in the doctor's office, and they're complaints about your physical ailments because your emotional and, more important, your spiritual health is undermined, and it plays out in your physical. You struggle with being able to accept love and nurturing. You feel depressed, anxious. Are you anxiety-driven? Are you taking anxiety medicine? Or chronically worried? You feel like you're not appreciated enough. People don't appreciate me. You find yourself judging others. Oh, wow. You frequently numb yourself with alcohol, drugs, sex, television, or excessive busyness. You feel disappointed with life. You've forgotten how to dream. Wow, that doesn't sound very joyful, does it? So, how do you combat that? Well, let's look at the book of Philippians. Let's look at a guy. So here it is. It's Jesus' birthday. We looked at the promise of his birth 700 years before he was born. We see at his birth his dad being told, hey, marry the girl. This is going to be a good thing. Not necessarily for you, by the way. Did you catch that? Joseph, you're not necessarily going to benefit from this, but boy, the world is going to benefit from what you decide to do. Now, that's a sales technique, isn't it? Hey, I'd like you to, you're going to have to run away from rulers. You're going to have to hide. You're probably going to be persecuted for this. We're not telling you this, but there's a madman on the throne in Israel, and he's going to kill all the children in Bethlehem, all the boys, 2 years old and younger. So that's your sales side. That's what you get out of it. But the world's going to be better for it. That's a sales job, don't you think? What about a guy who followed Jesus, who actually attacked all of Jesus' followers, hated Christianity, converts to it, and then he writes these enormous words? These might be worth memorizing. Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I say rejoice. Let your reasonableness be known to everyone. The Lord is at hand. In other words, he's saying, hey, God's pretty quick. Jesus is going to come back soon. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. What you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you. Now that takes some enormous courage to be able to say, hey, I'm pretty confident in the life I lead in Jesus. You want a good example? Follow me. How many of you can say that? I think Paul's pretty on target there. I rejoice in the Lord greatly that now, like you have revived your concern for me. You were indeed concerned for me, but you had no opportunity. Not that I am speaking of being in need, for I've learned in whatever situation I am to be, what's the word? Oh, wow. In any situation I can be content. I know how to be brought low, and I know how to abound in any and every circumstance. I've learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance, and need. And in that very powerful verse, I can do all things through him who strengthens me. Wow. You know what's even more of a wow? He wrote that from prison. And he's facing death. You know what else is amazing? The book of Philippians has a nickname. The book of joy. Now, I don't know about you, but I think a lot of us would struggle if we're chained to a Roman guard and we're facing death. We know we're going to die. And it's not the first time we've been here. I think we have trouble being that positive. What do you think? I mean, really? What's the difference? And I think the difference is because Paul did not seek happiness. No, he was grounded in joy, which is a completely different thing. Did we get that video in?
It's here.
It's here. Can you go ahead and play? Let's play this little video and then we'll come back.
Sound.
so how do you get that? How do you get to be like Paul? Well, here's a few rules. Happiness is an emotion driven by circumstances. And so if you're rooting your life and being happy based upon circumstances, it's always going to be a roller coaster ride. It will never vary. It will never change. You will be on hills one moment and valleys the next. Because it's circumstances that drive your happiness. Joy is an internal principle driven by a committed devotion, in this case, to Jesus Christ. And joy is not happiness, or a lot of happiness. Happiness is as fleeting as dew on the grass. Joy sustains us. Joy is fueled by an attitude of gratitude. Joy is practiced and strengthened in study, devotion, meditation, writing, reflection, and prayer. Joy is expressed in relationships. Number one, with God-centered foundation. That's the most important. If you get this part right, then this part gets right. So then with others, as created in the image of God, when you have problems with other people, it's because we've forgotten that they are created in the image of God, and we start to look at them as foes, as enemies, as barriers to our happiness. So we fight them. We hate them. And then with yourself is chosen by God for His purposes. You do have a relationship with yourself. Being alone is not to be feared. You are never, ever alone if you are a Christian. So here's some rules. Recognize negative self-talk is destructive and the bait of Satan. Promote positive affirmations. In other words, start to say some good things to yourself about yourself, because God has said some good things, pretty cool things about you. But then also, learn how to start saying positive things about people around you rather than negative. And then practice contentment. Be happy with what you have. So I'm going to tell you, I'm going to be bold, and I'm going to be like Paul this morning. You know, the ministry is tough. It's not a cavalcade of praise. You know, getting little envelopes with nice gifts from churches isn't every day. But in my life, I can tell you 100%, I know the difference. I left the business world. When I left AT&T, from January to June of that year, I had made over $50,000 net. Now that's important. Today I make $55,000, but there's a vast difference. And you wonder, how's a little church